All right, so when we left off with Massachusetts Bay, we talked about that religious dissent was not tolerated. Roger Williams is a great example of this, where they were given free liberty to keep away from us, and that is a direct quote from them. So free liberty to keep away from us. So the early 1630s, Salem minister Roger Williams struggled with Puritan leaders. And he argued that the Indians were the rightful owners of the land that they were on. And he stated that there should be separation between church and state. And he argued for more religious tolerance in the area rather than this notion of just stay away from us if you don't believe the same thing that we do. So they were planning on arresting him and deporting him. And so to avoid that, he fled southward and he founded his own colony then, Providence. And this is the first settlement in what would become the Rhode Island colony. Anne Hutchinson somewhat gains a hold on Winthrop's church congregation, and women in the 1630s who claimed powers of prophecy and led prayer meetings were quite frowned upon. And this is what she's doing. And she's holding these prayer meetings in her home. She suggested that most of the ministers and magistrates of the colony were godless, hypocrites, and that they were dangerous to the souls of their congregants. So John Winthrop and the government believed that she was a threat to the social order and especially to the subordination of women to men. In 1637, Winthrop wrote the following in his journal. The court charged her with diverse matters as her keeping 2 public lectures every week in her house. So she was being reprimanded for the private prayer meetings that she was holding. He continues, and for reproaching most of the ministers, all except Mr. Cotton, for not preaching a covenant of free grace, and that they had not the seal of the Spirit, nor were they able ministers of the New Testament, they were clearly proved against her. And after many speeches to and fro, at last she vented her revelations, among which that she had it revealed to her that she should come into New England and should here be persecuted, and that God would ruin us and our posterity and the whole state for the same. So the court proceeded and banished her. In 1637, the leaders expelled Anne Hutchinson, and so she also ended up fleeing to Rhode Island. And while there, she lost her husband. She ended up having a stillborn baby. She was actually later murdered by Indians. Winthrop made note to draw attention that it was proof of God's judgment against her heretics. Now, we talked about that idea. There's a lot more things that go on in Salem, and I'm sure that most of you did learn this in your high school history classes. So I really don't spend a whole lot of time talking about it in a college class, just because the Salem witch trials are such a popular subject to already go into. But one of the reasons that we do see these women come up as being branded with witchcraft and things like that is because as widows, and we talked about the fact that widows could still own land, and it was a threat to the social order. You take someone like Anne Hutchinson, who is holding prayer meetings in her home, and she is condemning what the leaders are doing in that area. It's much easier to brand these people as being witchcraft, a witch, than it is to say that, maybe these women are fairly intelligent. And it does just go completely against the social order of the time. So it's a lot. One of the things is to try to gain the territory and the land back that these widows have. Basically, they come up, they say they're witches, and then they can take their land back from them, and it's not being held by a woman anymore. So lots of things going on. Ultimately, I want you to know between Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, and Rhode Island. The big things are, yes, they want some religious freedoms, but they want the religious freedom to practice their own will. And you can go back and look at what happens to Roger Williams whenever he's trying to take the side of the Indians, when he's struggling with those Puritan leaders, and when he's suggesting things like separation between church and state, he's told to go away. He's also arguing for that religious toleration of saying, it's okay to have other people here. But most of the New England colonies, which we so proudly like to say, look, these colonies were built on freedom of religion. No, it was built on the freedom to practice their own religion without persecution, not for other people to come in and practice theirs. But it does stay very fairly stable in the area. You don't see as many indentured servants come in. You do see larger families. You see thriving colonies that are built on those family networks. You see areas where public schools are offered. So it is significantly different than the way that Jamestown is formed. So those are kind of the things. We will look at the middle colonies also. I'll continue to put some of these lectures up, and hopefully that continues to help as we progress further. So overall, I want you to be thinking about how the colonies develop differently, and the different types of charters that they have. So the Puritans are there. I want you to ask yourself, why are the Puritans here? Why are the Pilgrims here? The Pilgrims are here for a lot of political reasons, because they don't think that England can be fixed. Massachusetts Bay is definitely a religious reason, in that they want to be that beacon of light, even though it ultimately fails. So that's it for this one.